Not all our listeners know everything about AI. Some people stopping by this podcast are just curious. They want to know more about AI to uplift humanity. So what better way to understand and get on the same page on how AI works than for me to ask all the silly questions about AI and computer vision that you just don't want to ask? From the Soar studios, this is the AI to Uplift Humanity podcast. I'm Justin Brady, and today I'm joined with Dr. Satya Mallick, CEO of Opencv. Dr. Malik, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Justin. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think a good place to start is this. What is Opencv? I was a bit confused when I started learning about computer vision and what Opencv was. So for us mortals, what is Opencv?
Okay, let's start at the 30,000 feet view. Let me explain, what is AI, and then I'll dig deep into what is AI, what is machine learning, deep learning, and computer vision.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
AI is this very nebulous term. It's almost like a marketing term, which basically says that we want to make machines that think and act like humans. And it doesn't tell you how do you do that. In fact, very early machine AI systems, they did not use data. They used rules that were encoded by humans, and those were called expert systems. But later people learned that there are too many rules. You just cannot code all the rules in the world. If this, then do that, etc. So the best way to do it is to learn through data. And when we learn through data, it's called machine learning. Now, there is a part of machine learning which deals with neural networks. When we solve the problem using neural networks or neural networks with many layers, it is called deep learning. And finally, computer vision is the branch of science and technology which enables computers to see, roughly speaking, right? And there's a huge overlap between computer vision and AI, but not all computer vision techniques require AI. For example, face recognition obviously requires AI, which is part of, face recognition is part of computer vision. On the other hand, generating panoramas, that is also part of computer vision. And that doesn't require AI at all. Now, you can use some techniques which some AI in the generation of panoramas also, but traditionally, generating panoramas did not require any AI. Similarly, that is, when you take a picture on your phone using high dynamic range imaging, it is called HDR. You might have seen that thing. That is also computer vision, but it doesn't require any AI.
So that's fascinating. I didn't know that. I had no idea. So you're saying panoramas and HDR are a part of the computer vision family. So, okay, all right. So where does just photography and video stop, and where does computer vision start?
That brings me to the next difference between image processing and computer vision, right? So people usually call those things image processing. And the difference between image processing and computer vision is that in image processing, we have an input image, and the output is also an image. For example, when you're applying filter to an image, different kinds of filters, warm, cool, etc.
All those Instagram things.
Yes, that's image processing. However, when you get information out, for example, you're showing a person's face, and the information is the identity of the person. In that case, that's computer vision.
Okay, so when the computer is pulling identity data out, when the computer
information,
yes. Identity information. Okay,
any information out. For example, in security camera, you could be trying to count cars that are coming in, and that is information. The input is a video stream or an image, and the output is information. How many counts? How many cars went by? Similarly, let's say something else like fingerprint recognition. There you're doing identity calculation. When you're trying to find, pneumonia in lungs, In that case, the X-ray is the input image and the output is information, whether there is pneumonia or not.
Okay, so am I crazy, or is the line between image processing and computer vision at least a little bit somewhat blurry? I'm hearing no. I'm hearing no.
In image processing, you're not trying to get information out. You're producing another image, or you're producing a compressed image. You're not interpreting the image.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So if you're trying to pull data to do something else, that's computer vision. This is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And any computer vision scientists and AI people are probably like, hey, idiot, the way we say it is. But, for all of you people that are smarter than me, this is for a general audience, okay? And so one of the things that OpenCV does is it's open source, correct?
Yes. So OpenCV is the biggest computer vision library in the world. And it was born 20 years back. And it's a collection of about 2,500 different algorithms implemented over the years. Some of them are not relevant anymore, but it is a huge collection of computer vision libraries.
Okay. And so and that's just free for anybody to access.
Free, very permissible license, free for commercial use. Yes.
Now, why would someone need like a lot? Well, first of all, and like I said earlier, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions because I'm the idiot here, so I get to ask the stupid questions. But why would anybody need a library? And what is in this library? And again, this is a general audience. So What's in the library and why does anybody need it? Why can't they just make their own assets and resources?
Yes. So basically, the way science progresses and technology progresses is that we stand on the shoulders of giants. So when one person does the work and we are able to leverage their work for our own and contribute back, the whole community benefits. For example, this stitching panorama. If you were to write code for stitching panorama, it's a pipeline of 7 or 8 different algorithms, and it will take you, if you know everything about it, right, how to do it, it will take you a month to do a good job of implementing it. On the other hand, in OpenCV, it is 2 lines of code. You don't need to know computer vision. You could be a Python programmer. You just need these 2 lines of code. You're reading the image and you're passing it to what is called a stitcher class, and out pops the panorama. Done. So that's why we need this library, which does all the heavy lifting for you. And in some sense, it democratizes it for everybody, not just computer vision people with a PhD. It makes it accessible to programmers around the world.
Okay, so just like a real library, it might take a lot of time to start from scratch on something for work someone else has already done, because there still is human work that has to go into this stuff. There still is a lot of time training models. And so someone, training some AI model, there is human interaction with that. So someone may have done all that training. They may have done all that work. And so what OpenCV is doing is it's putting all that work that makes it accessible so someone else can iterate and get to a better product faster.
Yes. So we are providing the building blocks, almost like you can think we are providing Lego pieces, but the art or the science, technology, the solution, the product, that you have to create using these building blocks. Panorama was an example where, it is, you can pretty much create a product out of it. But in other cases, you have the building blocks, you can put them together to solve different problems.
Sure. Okay. And now wait a minute. Now I want to go back just a little bit. When you say panorama, you're not talking about the camera app stitching together a bunch of images to make a panoramic image. Are you talking about the Amazon product?
Yeah. So the Amazon or on iPhone, those algorithms are now part of the camera. But let's say just 10 years back, if you had to write that algorithm yourself, it would be a lot of work. Even now, if you are going outside mobile, right, forget about mobile applications for which there is inbuilt panorama stitching. But outside mobile application, let's say you're using SLR cameras, then you have to use some other product, or you have to use OpenCV to do the stitching.
Okay, so you are not. So what you're talking about when you say panorama, I think most of my listeners probably aren't aware that there's an Amazon product called Panorama, and so. Go ahead.
No, so I don't know exactly what the product is, Amazon product, but this panorama is basically image stitching. Like you do a panorama.
Oh, okay. So it is visual. Okay, good. I was just making sure. So yes. the obvious question here is, so I know some scientists, some AI scientists, there's concern. You've actually talked about concern about AI in the past on LinkedIn, and we're going to get to more of those concerns later. But some scientists have the idea and have the belief that all AI should be open source, and also the training data should be open source to make sure everything is responsibly pursued. So, I mean, I know this is a debatable issue, so I don't think there's a right answer here, but do you have an opinion on whether everything should be open source, or are there areas we should protect intellectual property?
It's not just about intellectual property, it's also about privacy. So, for example, medical data, if you put it out in the open, even if you anonymize it, there is a chance that using correlation, somebody would be able to figure out, whose medical data it is. This happened with the Netflix challenge also. Netflix created a challenge where you had to predict what movie a person would like, and they had anonymized it completely. But researchers were able to piece together and locate the identity of people based on that information. And some person, there was a lesbian person who sued Netflix, and there were a bunch of people who sued Netflix because their identity was revealed through this indirect mechanism. Oh. There are ways you can correlate things and figure out the identity. And that's why that challenge was abandoned after the first year. So
what you're saying is there's a healthy balance that needs to happen. There does need to be some open source AI development to keep things honest, but there also has to be There are reasons to close it down and protect people's privacy and intellectual property. Is there a basic strategy or a basic method that people should go through to determine if they should be open sourcing something or if they should keep it locked tight?
It's a very tricky situation.
Right,
I mean, there are certain things that nobody cares about, like industrial applications where you're trying to detect defects in a part manufactured. All that, if they open source it, that's great. And there is no person involved in that. You're solving an industrial problem, and all that data can be open sourced without any problem. And data is such a big deal. The whole AI revolution, which started, you could say the computer vision revolution, it became mainstream in the year 2012, and that was because of this data set called ImageNet. And there was this competition called ImageNet Large Scale Visual Recognition Challenge that was started in 2010. And because of that competition, people got a chance to solve computer vision at scale. So there is huge benefit to creating these open data sets, but at the same time, one has to be very careful. I personally think that we have to make as much data open source as possible, not just so that other people can contribute, also because if people are not careful, we may have bias in our data sets, which can have very, very bad consequences. And making it open source allows other researchers to look at the data and look for bias.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that something truly objective, like a computer, can't have bias. And I mean, that's not true, because people get bias because they are influenced too heavily one way or the other. And computers can be, I mean, I think of Microsoft Tay, right? Didn't they have that AI bot? And
Yep.
it only took, I think, 24 hours for the internet to make it into this racist, like crazy. It was like saying the most terrible. I think it was making anti-Semitic jokes and racist jokes in like 24 hours because people online trained it that way.
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously there are dangers and there are positives to any technology. One of the things you were talking about on LinkedIn is safety standards. So you mentioned on LinkedIn the importance of safety standards. I think the post was titled "Bad AI Can Kill." So
Yes.
what is an example of someone, or you don't have to call anybody out clearly, but what is an example of someone ignoring safety standards that very well could injure, kill, or do a lot of harm to an individual or a company?
Well, so that post in particular was about a very technical post about coding standards. And what happens is that when developers write code, there is some code that will function just fine. There is nothing technically wrong with it. But if you're not careful there are certain standards you have to meet to guarantee that that code will not crash, right? So that was what the post was about. And one has to be very careful about those coding standards, because as developers, when we are just learning something new, we tend to write whatever that works, and the only test we do
Sure.
is whether it works or not. But when we are building something for, say, autonomous vehicles or things like that, they have to have very rigid coding standard so that no matter what platform it is compiled on, it is never going to crash, right? Those are the very strict standards set by the industry, and that was what it was about. And it's very easy. It's not just about testing, because first of all, we have to do it right and then test it rigorously.
Right.
And sometimes it's possible that it will pass a lot of tests on different platforms and it will crash on some other new platform. A new chip comes up or something new is released, and it starts crashing on that. So one has to be very careful with how this coding is done, the programming is done.
Right. Most people's familiarity with software is some kind of free version, right? Like Facebook, free. Twitter, free. A lot of open source, like beta software, free. Clubhouse was free. So, and a lot of this software, even my Google phone, right? Like it has bugs and it's crashing all the time because Google's one of those companies just constantly iterating and trying things. And iPhone's the same way. They have bugs and they're always releasing things. And I think most people's familiarity with software is that it's crashing all the time. There are bugs all the time. And so when they hear about software going into cars and planes, I mean, there's already software in cars and planes, but when they hear about software becoming bigger on those platforms, I think a lot of people rightfully think, we don't buy it. We don't think you can write perfect software that will never crash. Are they wrong?
Well, never crash is difficult to say, right? But fortunately, the people who are building social networks are not the people who are building rockets, right?
Not yet, right? At least, unless Elon builds his social media network.
Right. The attitude is very different. The attitude is different. And we saw what happened with Uber. Uber had that attitude of creating, going too fast, and we saw how Uber fumbled, and the whole autonomous driving unit of Uber was dismantled.
Right.
And that is something we should never do. We are better off doing the Google way. They are extremely cautious in how they proceed with autonomous vehicle. And so that's the kind of engineers we want, who are extremely cautious. This is a new technology. I like to think, would I let the current technology in autonomous vehicle drive my kids autonomously? And the answer is no.
Right.
I'm never going to do that. And until that changes to yes, we have a lot of work to do. And when we ask the same question about the airline industry, it also airplanes also fly autonomously for the most part.
Yep, correct.
And There, my answer is yes. They have very rigorous standards, and whenever there is one mistake made, they have these two black boxes that they recover and analyze it and fix the problem. So every sacrifice, human life sacrifice that happens during these accidents, it's not a waste, right?
Correct.
We learn from that.
That's good.
And it's rigorously analyzed. And that is how the autonomous driving industry should also function. We should not have people building social networks, building these systems.
So stay off the metaverse for now. Just kidding. But this is good. I don't think, well, heck, I didn't even think about the fact that there are different kinds of development style, right? The same type of, I would call it a style, right? Because someone can be either more or less responsible. But there are different styles. There's the social media style where they're reckless and they break things and they have bugs all over the place because it's not someone's life, right?
Exactly.
But
exactly.
In the case of a car, yes, or in the case of a plane, yes, it is possible to make something that's crash-free or bug-free within the sense of safety. That's 100% possible. It's just a totally different development style, which is why people need to be careful who they hire and the standards and the safety standards they set. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment. And it's also true about, the parts, even the engineering manufacturing for when they are building a car, like when Toyota or Honda, they build cars, the components they choose, they meet very rigorous standards. Some of my friends work in those companies, or they are suppliers to those companies, and it is such a pain. And I keep telling them that thank God, right, that these companies take so much care to make sure that our cars are properly functioning over 10 years, 20 years. So.
Yeah, that's really fair. I'm glad. I never would have thought about the fact that just like any other thing, development comes in various shapes and sizes. So where's this all going? Like, I was looking at your blog, I was looking at Opencv, and there's such cool stuff in computer vision. It's just unreal. Stuff I never thought would happen in my lifetime, I'm seeing play out in front of me. With RoboFlow, I was like training a mask detector. And we got it so sophisticated that if I took the loops of the mask off my ears, like it said, hey, you're not wearing your mask right, like it was just unbelievable. I've seen license plate readers, posture detection, I think was on your website. And then, I don't know if you saw this, I saw it circulating on LinkedIn, but there was even an emotion tracker looking at Will Smith's face. Like AI and computer vision is starting to detect like facial muscles that are responsible for human emotion, which is crazy. So I think most people see this stuff and they say, well, either, whoa, that's creepy, or whoa, that's amazing. But I don't think they put it all together. So like, what does this mean for all of us? Like, what are the use cases you see that are truly exciting that maybe I don't see and the listeners don't see?
Yeah, so AI is, they say that it's like electricity. When electricity was first invented, it was used for lighting first. And that was a big thing. But then it transformed one industry after the other. And the same thing is happening with AI. We started by doing simple things, but now it's going to transform the medical industry, manufacturing, agriculture, you name it, autonomous vehicles, and finance. Everything is being transformed. The thing is that in computer vision, for example, if a human can do a visual task in less than a second, right now we have the technology to automate it. For example, the mask example you gave me, you can easily say, looking at a picture for 1 second, that, the person is not wearing the mask properly, once you have defined what properly means. And so that task can be easily solved by a computer now. But this is just the beginning. It's one of those transformations where it's not just the technology transformation, but there is social transformation taking place. How many jobs will be lost and new jobs will be created. So people will need to have different skills. But I also feel that AI would be more the tools that are available, even RoboFlow, for example, they are making people who do not need to have coding skills. They do not have coding skills
Right.
to actually be able to train a machine learning model, right? They need to know the principles, but not the coding skills. And that's a very big deal, because that's how technology transformation happens. When people without technical skills are able to use technology, and the technology just disappears in the background. Like a musician, when they are using when they are using an instrument, they're not thinking about Fourier transform and harmonics and things like that.
That's good.
They know what to do. They are playing with it, and they have a sense of what the tool does without understanding the scientific mechanism, how that sound is produced, or how the instrument is functioning, how the piano functions. They are able to use the keys to create a symphony, right?
Right. I love that. What's interesting is you kind of compare AI to electricity. They're different, obviously, but you kind of compare the innovation to how big electricity was back then. And we've been watching this home restoration. I think it's called Restoring Galveston or something. It has a different name on the DIY network. It's a long story, but it's a cool show. And you pick up all this cool information whenever you're watching a home restoration show about older homes. And there was this light that they were like looking at in an antique shop, and it was like gas and electric hybrid light, because at that point when electricity was being invented and when it was like being commercialized, there were a lot of people who thought, electricity probably won't catch on, and so we need to make these light fixtures that can do both, which is crazy to think about. But I think we're right there now. I think there are a lot of people that are like, this AI thing, who knows where it's going to go? They're giving it these very tight guardrails. It's only going to do these things and nothing more. And I don't think people understand how AI, as you said, will completely change every industry that we've known forever. This is pivotal. So I think a lot of people are probably scared by that. It's all around them. It's scary. They don't understand it. So people who are in that position, what should they do? Like if they felt like they've lost some control of some kind? And I also want to talk about game show here before we wrap up.
Yeah. The main thing is that AI is like any other tool. It amplifies the goodness as well as the bad things in humans, right? Think about the internet. Think about mobile. At one level, they have been a tremendous boost, but the negatives have also amplified. And the same thing would happen with AI. So we have to be careful. For example, with kids, I'm very scared of giving my kids access to tools like TikTok. Fortunately, they are not that age yet, because those algorithms, they play with your mind. They can get you addicted to things, right? So we have to be very careful how this thing plays out. We have to be careful where we allow AI to interfere with our life to make it easier, but not take over our life. It cannot be the master. It has to serve humanity.
And before I let you go, what is this thing? I saw it on LinkedIn. It's it's so cool. And Opencv is doing a game show. It's absolutely fascinating. But before we get to that, I have a question for you, the listener. How much video do you have at your organization? You probably have a lot of it. If you're recording things, keynotes, webinars, panel discussions, all that stuff, chances are you're probably sending people to YouTube or Vimeo. And those platforms are great, but how cool would it be if all that video lived on your site and it was searchable by a single keyword? And I'm not talking like descriptions and titles. I'm talking searchable by every keyword ever said on all your video at the exact timestamp with a transcript. It's called Deep Search, and you can try 10 hours for free right now at soar.com/deep search. All right, Dr. Satya Mallick is still with me. What is Opencv Game Show?
So OpenCV has expanded beyond the library. We do competitions. We have a hardware platform, and we had some budget that our sponsors, Intel, they came up with a small budget and said that, oh, can we do something interesting here, right? And I suggested that let's do a game show. But the problem with a game show on Zoom is that it would be very uninteresting. So fortunately, we had good contact at LightTwist. It's a company that creates virtual sets. So you could literally take a video anywhere. So you could have a video recording, or you could take a video using your phone, and it would place you in a virtual set.
Sure, yeah.
And we partnered with them, and we created this game show experience where this whole thing happened on a Zoom call, and we took those video feeds and put them in a virtual set. And there are pieces in that show where you completely forget that this is not real. The technology is still being developed. It's not out. It's not out yet. It is in beta. So of course there are places where it doesn't. You can see the flickering, etc. But there were genuinely times, even long segments in the game show where you completely forgot that this is not real. It was amazing. It's not just background subtraction. They remove the background and put the people in the set, but they also try to match the lighting.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So that's so what results are you seeing? Like, what was the objective behind this? Just to raise awareness for OpenCV, or what was your objective when you started it?
Well, everything about AI is so serious these days. Our objective was to have some fun, whistle while you work, and also, get people interested in AI in general, the technology, but also some trivia, right? The game show, we just wanted to have some fun with the idea of these trivia that people don't know.
Right. So it's kind of an awareness play.
Yeah. I mean, the classic example is that when computer vision was one of the questions in the game show was that the person Marvin Minsky, who is one of the founders or one of the founding fathers of AI, he thought that computer vision was such an easy problem that he gave his grad student 3 months to solve this problem back in the 1960s. Yeah, he gave him. I mean, there is a it's a documented PDF. So we had some question about that.
Oh my gosh.
Things like that, right? It is fascinating to understand where we came from. We thought these things would be easy,
right?
But once you start getting in it, you realize how difficult visual perception is.
No kidding, and I'm glad people like you are working on it. Dr. Satya Mallick, CEO of OpenCV. If people want to connect with you, and first let's start here. If people want to connect with you, where do they go? What's the best URL? What's the best website to go to?
LinkedIn is probably where most people connect with me. Satya Mallick, if you search, you will find me there. And on Twitter, I'm Learn OpenCV.
Also, where can people find this whole OpenCV game show? Is there a subscribe option? Where do they go to find that, and how often does it post?
So we did a pilot. This was a pilot, and we will analyze the results and see when we can do that more often. But if everything goes well, maybe every quarter we will have a game show. Okay,
and what's the best? Is just opencv.com to find that?
OpenCV.org/game show is where we have a forum where people can participate in. There are some freebies people can get by voting on the contestants, and I will send you the link to the YouTube video for the actual game show.
That is perfect. Dr. Satya Mallick, CEO of OpenCV, thank you so much for spending time with me and the listeners and uplifting humanity.
Thanks so much, Justin. Thanks for having me here.
And hey, thanks for listening today. This is the AI to Uplift Humanity podcast.